Zacchaeus' mother had very high hopes for him when she named him. In Hebrew, Zacchaeus means clean. Most likely, the townfolk in Jericho thought the name was ironic, since he wasn't just certainly defiled and unclean by his collaboration with the Romans, but also was an outcast because of his lifestyle and because of his um, opulent wealth that he had gained in ways that everybody was at least suspicious of. And so Luke paints us the picture of Zacchaeus, and other than his name, he has nothing going for him, right? He's short, he's a tax collector, he's wealthy, which you or I might think is okay, but nowhere does Luke say that that's okay. Like, everything is wrong. And yet, a bit on the ingenious side, he finds a way to encounter Jesus, and Jesus tells him to come down from the sycamore tree because he must stay at his house that night. Now, this is doing a handful of things. This is an invitation and an assurance and a challenge to Zacchaeus. It's a very uncomfortable challenge to the rest of the people crowded around Jesus, to his apostles, to us. Um, and and also now the translations get confusing because there are two completely legitimate ways to think of Zacchaeus' response, either in the present or the future tense. Either he said, I'll give half of my belongings to the poor, and if I've defrauded anyone, I'll give it back. Or he is saying, I give half of my possessions to the poor. Like, Lord, like I'm not as bad as you think. I've been giving to the poor, and if I defraud anybody, I give it back right away. And that's just not translational possibilities. If you look through the early commentaries, the fathers of the church, there's opinions that go both ways. Um, Either way, this is a very messy situation because even if Zacchaeus was giving generously and being fair, he was still an outcast and collaborating with the occupying Romans. And if in this moment of grace he repented and turned to Jesus and decided to make right in his life, that still probably didn't satisfy anybody about where Jesus went for dinner. And so we have this kind of messy situation at hand, and and I think it's challenging for us in our embrace of others, and I think it's an incredibly assuring gospel for those who feel, for whatever reason, in the midst of our society or community, on the edges, somebody who's been through a divorce and doesn't quite fit in with his friends now or her friends now, somebody who is divorced and remarried and at the edges of our Eucharistic assembly, somebody who might, because of their choices, their life, feel in the church almost as if they don't fit, almost as if they're standing behind the tightly packed crowd of people and they can't get through to grace and love and salvation. And Jesus goes out of his way to tell you, I mean to stay at your house tonight. Like, I saw you, I noticed you, I love you. And that's I think an important piece. But then our role in that process, because we shun people, right? I remember one of my saddest moments as a pastor, a young pastor who didn't understand the dynamics of pastoral ministry or the dynamics of Gonzales, Texas. But I had a, a single mom who came and wanted to baptize her child. And so I thought, my goodness, she needs the support of our parish community. She needs friends. She needs aunts and uncles and grandparents. She needs people that will help her in this process. And so I said, why don't you baptize your child at the Mass? And she wasn't dressed in a way that most of the people at Mass thought would have been appropriate. I'm sure she put on her best dress. But it was not comfortable for the people of the parish. And they probably knew a lot more than I did about who the father was and how she got pregnant and all of that. And the people of my parish visibly shunned her when she came to baptize her child at Mass. And I did what I could to try to make the difference up, but it was the only time that I remember being disappointed with my parish, right? And I told them the next week how disappointed I was. That as a community, we hadn't reached out to someone who was at a moment of willingness to turn her life to good and would have benefited greatly from our embrace and welcome and love. And for us as church today to recognize that if we're going to follow Jesus in the gospel, that might be one of the more important functions that we have, to find ways to reach out to and embrace those who feel like they are rejected, those who see themselves as outcast, those who, in spite of the name that their mom gave them, are unclean. And for Zacchaeus, this was a great day. For the people of Jericho, it was a good day. For Jesus' apostles, it was an important day. And for us as church, I hope that it'll be both a blessing of welcome and a challenge that we would welcome our brothers and sisters and give them the chance, like Zacchaeus, to shine if he was doing good, or maybe more realistically and more importantly, a chance to turn their lives in repentance because they've known love and begin to do good.